Okay, everybody. Today, August 10th, 2023, we are wrapping up the class and kind of looking at the last assignment, which is our final project. And so this video is going to be a review of the grading rubrics, plural, two rubrics, for our final project in the summer of 2023. Now, real quickly, I will say, the only other assignment outstanding is due this weekend, which is a hands-on test. So we got 8/13, which is Sunday. So there's a hands-on test on React that's due on 8/13. And then this final project is due the following Sunday of the 20th. So those are the two assignments that we have left in the class. So to review the hands-on project, luckily, a lot of this has been done already, right? So this is a medium to larger, we'll just call it a medium-sized application that we've written over the course of this semester. And so on Inside Rankin, the first rubric I'm going to draw your attention to, and actually even before I go into the rubric, I'm going to go to the grade breakdown. So I'm going to start at a very high level here and talk about what is this grade worth. Okay, now we reviewed this information at the first week of the semester, but you can see here that our grade breakdown is hands-on tests are worth 45% of the grade, your labs are worth 45% of the grade, and the final project is worth 10% of the grade. So that's the weighting here. In other words, if you have a 100% in this class and you do not do the final project, you're going to end up with a 90. Right? You could be sitting at the perfect A and you end up with a solid B. So it's worth enough. You definitely want to complete and do this assignment. Now, if you go into the weighting of the final project, you can see there's basically a breakdown of 3 different grades that will go into this. And I mentioned 2 rubrics, but basically you have the code. Okay, now the code is worth 200 or 50% of that grade, 200 points. And that's going to be one rubric. The second rubric is a rubric of 100 points that'll go over how you should make a PowerPoint or a slideshow presentation, and another 100 points for recording a video to record yourself demonstrating the live demo of that. So these two things here I combined into one rubric. Now the reason why the code isn't worth more, essentially all of our labs have been doing this final project all semester long. So your grade already is a large reflection of doing this final project all semester. And so this is kind of the icing on the cake, if you will, because again, your grade is already a majority of working on this final project. So that's the weighting breakdown and that's the importance. Now to go into the coursework on this class, and you're going to see these 3 assignments labeled final project. You're going to see they're all basically due at 11:30. I need to change this one to be due at 11:30 as well. 11:30 on that Sunday of 8/20. So let me just change the due time so that those assignments will stay open. Okay, so then let's start with the final project, and I'll even update this to say final project. This is basically your code, right? So this is your final project code. Okay, this is the 200 points or the 50% of the grade itself. Okay, so if I go into that assignment, the final project code, and I open the Google Doc. Okay, so this is called Exam 6, Hands-on Final Project. And you can see I have that open twice, so I'm just going to close it once. This is the rubric. Now, I should already have access to your front end and your back end. So this is largely what I need access to. I should already have those access. If you've been keeping up in the class, I already have permissions to your front end and your back end. And so there's different phases, right? So read through the rubrics for each phase of the project. So start with phase one. Phase one, this goes back all the way back to Lab 202, where we used a piece of software called Unlisted, and we made a draft of our database schema, or what's called an ERD, Entity Resource Diagram. We made a picture similar to this to kind of map out our database schema, our database diagram. Okay, that's really what this is, right? What is the data that we're storing in our database, and how are we saving it? What I'm asking you to do is go back to this diagram that you submitted in Lab 0202 and update this diagram to be current. And so we have users, we have a users table, we also have a roles table that's not even reflected in here. We have, and I say table, I should say collection in Mongo. We have another collection called edits that is not reflected here. We've made a lot of changes to our database. And what is the final state of that database? And I want you to update this ERD. Now you might go back to Lab 202 where we went to here. You might go back in the playlist and see how did we use Unlisted, because I know that's been a couple of months since we've used this tool. But the point is, this is the lab where we created an ERD. I want you to update that ERD. I want you to export that as a JPEG, and we're going to use that JPEG. You're going to make a little JPEG, and this is our database diagram. When you're talking about your Mongo database, you could say, these are my collections, this is my data, this is how I'm storing data in my Mongo database. Okay, so there's 14 points there on the database design, and you will use this JPEG. Now this JPEG here is not the JPEG you will use. Obviously, this is dated, right? This is kind of what we called the first draft of our database schema when we were drafting this in the beginning part of this course. Okay, phase two is the web API. Now again, this is kind of a combination of a bunch of labs. Okay, you worked on the back-end web API for the first half of this course, at least. It was built over a series of lab assignments, okay? You don't really need to list the lab assignments, but if you go back into the course, you can kind of see when were we doing RESTful APIs and when were we doing Express. We made a bunch of routes. And basically, I'm going to give you 2 points per route. And so if you count all of these routes, you're going to count 24 routes. 2 points each for each route. And what I'm asking you do is go back to these routes and just clean them up. Okay, make sure that these routes are they're throwing the right errors when something, isn't given to the route in the right, if the data is not provided correctly, if it's a 404, 401 permissions, user ID not found, right? If the front end provides an invalid user ID, then let's make sure the back end is responding appropriately. And so again, by and large, if you've been keeping up with the class, you've done this, okay? But what I'm asking you do is clean it up. Go back, double check your work, make sure your routes are working for bugs, test case, users, so on and so forth, okay? Now, there's 48 points here, okay, for the routes. And again, by and large, you've probably done a lot of it. The status codes, okay? Now, you're gonna notice there's no points associated with these status codes directly, okay? I will say that if your code has uncaught bugs, in other words, you will miss points for having bugs in your code. But in general, these status codes, are gonna respond to different conditions appropriately, right? If the front end requests a page that's not found, we're going to send a 404, page not found. And so these status codes are what I would call suggestions to write clean, usable, workable code. And while there might not be points initially for these status codes, I will say that it will help you avoid bugs and problems that might creep up. Okay, so read through these status codes, and when you're updating these routes, okay, apply the appropriate status codes to the routes. Okay, and again, read through this. Read through these suggestions and make sure your routes are sending the appropriate status codes to the front end. Okay, and again, anytime you're hitting a database, right, you're going to wrap a lot of logic and try catches. We've done all that. Make sure you've got the appropriate exception handling, right, with try catches, so you're not crashing. All right, phase 3. So phase 1, database ERD, right, database design. Phase 2, backend web API. Phase 3, authentication authorization. We had a lab where we made a table, and this table, we updated all of these rows and columns, to have specific permissions. Okay, now again, probably similar to your database. The database evolved with time, as it should. Your permissions may have evolved with time. Okay, so what I'm asking for here, this is the simple 5 points. Just give me the permissions that you have implemented at each route. Okay, so you should be able to update this table, and then again, when you're doing your presentation, you should be able to include this table in your video presentation. Just like when you update your database diagram, it says this schema should be highlighted in your video presentation. So you will find points on the video presentation to include your ERD and your permissions table. Okay, so complete the permissions table, complete the ERD, put them in your video, and that's what I'm getting at. Then here, there's basically 22 routes here that have permissions, and I'm asking you, this is basically 22 points for coding those permissions. There's 5 points for coding a login authentication route, and I'm basically generating JSON web tokens. Again, if you've been keeping up with the course, you should already have these 5 points. You should be able to update the user. Now, we coded the backend for a self-update and an administrator update. Okay, so we coded the backend for that. Now, I don't think we coded the front end for the self-update. So that's something that I want to point out here. This is more specifically on the back end. So again, I know we did this if you followed along. However, that is not something that we implemented. I don't recall implementing that route for the user me route on the front end. Okay, so adding up all these points on the back end so far in the database, I think it was worth about like 105 points. Okay, so that leaves about 100 points for the front end. Okay, and again, the front end, this is what we've been doing like for the past 2 weeks. We've been working with React. We've been working with all these dependencies with React. We've been making all these React components. Okay, we've been working with theming, with Sass, some Sass theming. We made all of these front end routes, like we talked about back end routes. Now we're talking about front end routes. Okay, so when the user navigates to a /login, what component do you show? /register, what component do you show? This front end route, again, just going off the top of my head, I don't remember doing this, so you're going to have to implement that. We worked with toasts, navbar footer, login form. Again, you're using Axios to hit your database. Okay, on all of these. So you're going to notice on all of our components, we're working with Axios to work with your database. Okay, and these are all the components. 6 points for theming, right? So we already did some theming, and you can bring in some Google fonts, you can bring in React icons, you can bring in a theme from Bootswatch, okay, to basically give yourself a theme. And then finally, so that's 190 points up until this point. Again, a lot of it's done for you. A lot of it is just clean up code and making sure it all works. The last 10 points is something I wanted to implement to make everyone's project unique, is custom functionality, right? So a lot of this has been, a lot of this class has been, following the lead, if you will, of my coding demonstration. So certainly you have the tools to, for example, I'll just read here. Throughout all of the labs, we have implemented various features. I'd like you to implement at least one new feature that was not covered in the class. These features should require additional research, code experimentation outside of this project, and troubleshooting. So it's just like what we do a lot of times in a lab. Before we bring in a new package, we're going to experiment with the package in a sandbox outside of the project. And so I don't recommend you, like the first thing here, items to consider implementing include but are not limited to. And so you can just implement one of these if you want to, or something else. But the first one, research a popular NPM package and utilize a new package that was not introduced in this course. Okay, so that would bring in new functionality. Obviously, I haven't covered something. This would be something that you would research, experiment with it outside of this project, and then figure out how to bring it into this project. And so that's one thing you could do to get this 10 points on custom functionality. Another thing you could do, we danced around, but we never implemented Gmail credentials, Google credentials. You could bring in, authentication with Google credentials using Passport. So we danced around that. We never quite brought that in, so you could go do that. It says we implemented some conditional code on the front end to display components based on permissions. However, there are many permissions that were not accounted for, and this could be completed. And so, again, if a user doesn't have the ability to update a test case, for example, why would you show them the update test case controls inside of React? And so there's a bunch of permissions in here that we did not account for those permissions on the front end. We did that a little bit, but not a lot. So you could kind of flush out that functionality because, again, that's not something that we did together. A lot of applications send emails or send text notifications. And so I've had students do that before. They research how to bring in an email. You could send an email when you register a new user. You could send an email when you register a new bug. You could send a text message. And so there are packages out there that can, send emails and send text messages. You could consider bringing that in. You could consider CRUD functionality on another thing, right? So when we have collections in our database, well, we have users, we have bugs, we have test cases. You can add a new collection, right, to your database schema, and then work with another collection or work with another subdocument that would be something that we didn't already, we haven't done. Another thing to do is there's a bunch of APIs out there. Do some research on an API and bring it in. Bring in eBay. Bring in, a feed of some sort. Bring in a weather feed. Bring in, that doesn't make sense for this project. Bring in something that makes sense, obviously. But the point is there's a bunch of APIs that are out there. Do your research. Find an API that makes sense to bring in, and bring in a public free API. And so that's something else you could consider doing. This is just a few suggestions for this. You don't have to do any one of them, but these are just options. All right. Now, that's 200 points that we've just covered. We have 200 points more, basically breaks down to your PowerPoint presentation, that's 100 points, and a video that you're going to record. If I scroll down here, Live demo recording grading rubric, this is also 100 points. So the PowerPoint. What's on the PowerPoint? Well, it's all right here. Let's go through this briefly. Your target audience for this presentation is potential employers. This is your opportunity to sell yourself to get a job through the code that you've worked on all semester. Ideally, during the interview process, you would be able to get a potential employer to watch your presentation on YouTube, and more importantly, review your code repos. You want to talk about the code you wrote. Why did you write it this way? What are the problems that you encountered? You want to talk about the code and the troubleshooting that you had to do. Okay, if you can get them to watch your video, then that's great. But more importantly, you want them to, really look at your code and discuss your code with you. And this is a statement here that I made. A good project can be the difference between landing a job and not. Rankin Technical College is a 2-year associate degree. You are in the market with a lot of other competitors, if you will, applying for the same job. Okay, what's going to set you apart from anybody else is the hard work that you've put into this project and projects like this. Okay, projects, live, working, real world application software that you've written that would blow away someone with a bachelor's degree who hasn't written software at half the complexity that we've implemented in this class. Okay, good projects make all the difference in the world. Every employer wants someone who is trainable. That's why you get the diploma. The diploma proves that you're trainable. The project proves you can write software. So that's what you're showing off here. Remember why we chose this project in the first place. This is a video that we watched. It is the #1 coding project. It says guaranteed. I don't like that label. There's no guarantees in life, right? There's no guarantees in life, but guaranteed to help you get a software job is how I would critique that. That's a little clickbaity, but it is a good video. You need to create a PowerPoint with the following information. So I am asking for a slide deck. It doesn't have to be PowerPoint. It could be Google Slides. It could be Prezi, whatever you want to use. Okay, the slides need this information. If the slides don't have this information on them and you don't review this information, you won't get the credit, right? Your name, your current year and semester. So like I'm a second-year student, I'm in my 3rd semester. The name of your project, Evan Gudmested's Bug Tracker. The background of the project, in your own words, why did you take this on? You could say I took this on because my teacher made me. That is a bad answer. You should say something more along the lines of I took this on because I'm trying to learn software development, and you learn by doing, right? You don't learn by reading about it, you learn by writing software. So I took on a larger scoped project because I'm trying to learn in depth how to write software. What did you learn from this project, and what would you do differently next time? Those are things you have to come up with. You're going to include slides of the technology stack. You're going to go, hey, this is a MERN technology stack. I learned Mongo. I learned Express. I learned Node. I learned React. Okay? This is a screenshot of my Mongo collections. And by the way, here's my database ERD. Here's that screenshot that we just talked about, the importance of the ERD. So you're going to include that screenshot in the video. It says get screenshots of each layer. This is just screenshots. This could be screenshots of Mongo Atlas. This could be screenshots of the code that you've written. This could be screenshots of the front end interface. Okay? But again, here you're putting the screenshots of the application at the different tiers, and you're talking about the technology stack that you learned this semester. You learned Mongo, you learned Node, you learned Express, and you learned React. And you're using screenshots here. You're going to include your database ERD. You're also going to include the permissions table that you implemented those permissions in the back end. Again, slides include an overview of the features. Basically, this is like a bulleted list of what the software can do. It can register new users. It can it encrypts their passwords. You can log in using those users. It saves everything in the cloud. We hosted it. If you hosted it, by the way, if you hosted it online, this is the time to say, hey, I learned about this Google Cloud and G Cloud and actually hosting my app using these tools. If you did that, again, not a requirement, but if you did that, that's a good time to talk about what are the features. Hosting the app live on the internet, G Cloud. Again, what can it do? We can log in, we can create bugs, we can edit bugs, we can work with test cases. What can your software do? Again, screenshots of the live project. I kind of already talked about that. The number of slides, 5 slides at minimum, respectable font size. When it comes to the presentation, this is not short form content. Okay, the internet is full of short form content, be it TikToks and Reels. This is not short form content. You want to go in depth. If anyone's willing to explore, this with you and watch your video, I would say 15 minutes at minimum. Now as far as a maximum, I'm going to let you be the judge. Okay. I'm no stranger to long videos. I have many 2-hour videos, that. I don't know what's realistic, how long you might actually have someone's attention, 15, 20, 30 minutes, if you're lucky, so maybe considering a 13-minute upper bound. There's no points for how long it can be, but at the minimum, I'm asking for a 15-minute video. Okay. The last slide that you have should say live demo, right? Where you're going to go from a PowerPoint presentation view to actually going through and using your software. Okay, so the last slide says live demo time. Now is my time to actually use my software and demonstrate it. So go ahead and do that. Now, let me back up in just a little bit more here. Over the course of the next week, you've got about a week and a half before this is all due. I'm going to spend a majority of my time working on the functionality of this, right? I'd say 3/4 of my time I'm spending on getting a good application, right? And then the last 1/4 of my time I'm working on these PowerPoints and recording myself and the like. Okay, but it's most important to write the code and then present it is also important. But yeah, this is 100 points for making a PowerPoint presentation. That's what these 100 points are. Now, when it comes to recording, I realize a lot of students, myself included, I never recorded something until I did. And so I've used a couple different recording softwares out there. Probably the 2 most popular are the first 2 bullets here, Streamlabs and OBS. If you're new and you're starting and you're like, hey, I'm recording something for the first time, Streamlabs is probably your answer. Streamlabs is very popular and I found it easy to use, right? There's going to be a learning curve for any of this software. OBS, I liked OBS because I was actually able to pause my videos as I do so often and resume, where that was not an out-of-the-box feature of Streamlabs because it's streaming as opposed to like recording. So Streamlabs I was not able to pause. If you want to be able to pause, you might want to figure out OBS, but there's a little bit more of a learning curve for OBS. Okay, there's some other free software out here that I put. So recording videos, again, there's going to be a learning curve here. You're going to have to spend some time figuring this out, and that's part of this. Now, that's not to say that I am not here to help. I am here to help you. Should you, ask for help on Discord, I can hop onto your machine and help you figure this part out because I realize you haven't done it before. So not a problem there. Okay, so there's some recording instructions. When it comes to the recording, you can do it in one video, like you could just do it like I do a lot of times, just record straight through. That's probably going to be the easiest. But if you want to break it across multiple different videos, and then you can edit them together, stitch them together, if you will, that's also an option. But I would probably just say, okay, just do it in one stretch. Let me explain the challenge behind doing it in one video. You'll notice that in the recording, okay, there's points that application is free of any noticeable bugs or errors. In the past, I've had students, they're using their software and they haven't tested it enough. And because they haven't tested their software enough, when they're recording their software, you know, their live demo, when they're recording it, they find a new bug that they didn't know existed, and they keep the bug in there. Okay, your software will not be perfect. It will not be perfect, but I'm asking you to sweep the bugs under the carpet. In other words, don't show the world the bugs that exist. Okay, if they exist, I understand that. Okay, that's software. That's the world of software that we live in. Okay, but don't show off your bugs. Okay, sweep them under the carpet. Don't show them on your video. So if you're recording in one long, 30-minute swoop, you're doing the live demo, and then, oops, here's a bug, you will miss points. Okay, there's 20 points here associated from not showing off bugs. You show me a bug, that's off 20 points, right? I don't want to do that. You don't want that to happen, but don't show off your bug. So the challenge is, if you come across a bug, you're going to basically lose the whole recording and have to start over. So that's why it makes sense to break it up and then stitch them together. Okay, so that's your call. So you're going to record it. You have the option for video editors. So here's a video editor that you can download, and again, this can combine videos together and do some basic editing. Shortcut.org is one option. Okay, so here's a bunch of things. Now, you may not have a YouTube channel. Well, if you have a Gmail, you have an account already. You have a YouTube account if you have a Gmail. And I'm not saying you got to put anything out publicly. In fact, if you mark it as unlisted, I will not put your video out there publicly. Okay, this is just something that I can see. Okay, so if you're not comfortable making it public, that's fine. You can mark your video as unlisted and share it with me so that I can watch it and I can grade it. Okay. You can mark it not for kids, and that means it can be added to my playlist. Okay, so if you want it on my playlist, mark it not for kids. It's not super important to me that I have to have all the videos on my playlist. So again, if you mark it as unlisted and you mark it for kids, then I won't even be able to add it to my playlist. Not a big deal if I can or can't. So when you're recording yourself, you're going to go through your slides. It's worth 10 points. So making the slides is worth 100 points. Covering the slides is worth 10 points. You're giving a live presentation of your application on the recording. You're sweeping the bugs under the carpet if there are any bugs. But you're going to spend the next week and a half trying to clean up any bugs, right? And trying to eliminate bugs. But if there are bugs, you're not showing them off. And during the recording, you're also going to highlight the custom functionality you added to your project. Okay, so I definitely want you to go over the new feature that you brought in that makes your project unique. Again, you're going to get some points for giving me that link and that you met a 15-minute minimum duration. And then finally, here's 10 points. And this is just something that is a good thing to do. Okay, similar to a mock interview, when you record yourself, so like if you're doing a mock interview, you're sitting down in front of a camera, recording yourself, getting asked questions. Okay, I want you to share your recording with a friend, a family member, or a trusted acquaintance, somebody you know, to gather their feedback. So I want you to iterate over this video. I do not want this video to be done at the last minute and then you turn it in on Sunday night. Okay, I want this video to be something that you do on Monday. and you show it to 5 people, and you say, hey, I'm trying to make this to make myself employable. If you were a potential employer, what would you change about this? How can I make this better? I want you to gather feedback from people, at least one person. I want you to consider their feedback and then implement. You don't have to implement all their changes, but implement some of their suggestions. Just because they have a suggestion doesn't make it a good suggestion, but you're going to listen to them and you're going to see if that's something you can do. And I want you to implement 1, 2, 3 of their suggestions. Point is, I want you to iterate over this video. I want you to do it once, then I want you to get some feedback, and I want you to listen to that feedback, and I want you to make it better. Okay, so the final thing that you submit to me should not be your first recording. This should be something that you made better at least one time through an iteration process. Okay, so again, 100 points for the PowerPoint, 100 points for the recording and the YouTube link. And that's how we're going to finish out this class. That, again, this is all due on the 20th. We got 10 days, call it a week and a half. That is a lot of work to do in 10 days. You have your work cut out for you, but thankfully we've done a lot of this throughout the course of the semester. And Grant, are you still with me?
Yeah.
You're speaking on the behalf of all of the class. What questions do you have? That's not fair of me to put you under that pressure.
No, I'm not sure. I think we kind of covered when we were talking earlier.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What I'll say, that's not fair of me to put Grant under that. If you have questions, you can reach out to me on Discord. That's what it's there for. Okay? Reach out to me on Discord. Grant does not have to speak on your behalf. This is worth 10% of your overall grade, and it is due on the 20th. Any questions, let me know. All right. Other than that, I'll just say I really enjoyed this class. I hope you enjoyed this class too. My learning has continued in this space, and I hope you've learned a lot too. So, all I can say is I genuinely enjoyed learning. Appreciate getting to know you guys a little bit, and I hope you stay in touch. If I can ever do anything to help you, in this space, in this job market, in this educational world, please reach out, let me know. Thanks.